Hello, everybody, and welcome to Red Wings Daily, presented to you by FanArch. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, coming to you from the southwest corner of Washington State, 2,454 miles from Little Caesars Arena. Today we celebrate 100 episodes of Red Wings Daily. I would have the streamers, the confetti, and the balloons out, but I'm not really in that celebratory of a mood. But I will celebrate you as subscribers and viewers. We're closing in on 100,000 views. We have over 600 subscribers. We've been trickling over the last, it really spiked up a lot, and it's been more of a trickle. So I invite you, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, to please do so. I will continue to give Red Wings updates. I will continue to see how the team is doing, our prospects, obviously in the off season, if we don't make the playoffs, once everybody is done and everybody's on their summer break and whoever wins the Stanley Cup is parading it around this, that, or the other, we are going to still have plenty to talk about because there is plenty of moves to be taken and done in the off season. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. As far as the comments, we've had a lot of support given to us and given to me personally. We've had a lot of complaints given to us and given to me personally, but I think a lot of the negativity really has just kind of gone the way of the team and basically the frustration, especially as the team has played over the last 10 weeks or so since being on the top of the Atlantic Division and basically tied for the top of the Eastern Conference in late January. It has been one of those February marches to forget, just like the last two seasons have had that. And it looks like we're basically hitting the Lightning 3 times in a row, and not even the Lightning that we're going to be playing on the ice, just the Lightning of us basically weeding ourselves out of a playoff spot. But I tend to put on a happy face. Today might not be the best day to pitch the show to new subscribers and viewers because I'm pretty down right now on the way things have transpired, and for good cause, folks, for good cause. Like, we do this show every day trying to put on that happy face. I've been in a situation, I've talked with 100 and some odd broadcasters, and they're always putting on a happy face. But sometimes when that microphone goes off, when the audio recording device goes off, you just kind of hear, what's up? How are we doing this? What is it looking like this season? I don't know. And that's happened plenty of times. So, folks, I have kept a happy face on to try to really put some kind of glint of hope and everything in the Red Wings. But it's been harder and harder as the season has drawn on. Some of these losses over the weekend, a loss to New York. The New York Rangers have no business beating the Detroit Red Wings. I don't care if it's at Madison Square Garden. I seriously doubt that place is that full the way the Rangers have been playing, but they certainly knew how to play against us. Actually, let's just get into the show. We've had enough of this, pomp and circumstance. We are grateful for all you for tuning in. We are grateful for all you all subscribing, and this is why, because I'm going to give you some Red Wings content. So, 0 out of a possible 4 points over the weekend. I didn't expect us to beat Minnesota, and we didn't. But we played better against Minnesota than we did against the Rangers. So just going over the Rangers, Gibby now is 5-8-1 in his last 14 starts. Gibby is almost as bad as Talbs. Not really. Talbs hasn't really been given enough chance to be just as bad as Gibby. It's been torrential. Talbs is 1-3-3 in 2026. But going back to the Rangers game, power play 0 for 4. Penalty kill 1 for 2. So they get 1 to our 0. Well, they beat us 4-1. I mean, they basically just took it to us. We got into a hole and we just couldn't get out of it. We basically keep doing this. We keep not scoring over the first period, first half of a game. We come on strong in the second half, but sometimes by the time that we start to come on strong, we're already in a too big of a hole. We basically got a goal. We were just pushing. We basically got a goal. Perron got his first goal back with the Red Wings. So there's something to celebrate, but that's it. I mean, that is really it from the Rangers game. Moving on to the Wild game. So here we are back for our first of 4 home games, our final homestand of the season against a Wild team, third best team basically in the league. And they showed it in the second period. We got off to a 1-0 lead early in the game because of Aljo, and Then the second period just turned into an absolute nightmare. They scored 4 goals in the second period, pretty much starting in the second period, right as I think it was less than a minute in, maybe even 18 seconds in. It was that quick. They just jumped right on us. And anytime something like that happens, it takes you completely out of your game. Basically letting a team score like that before you've even had a chance to break in the ice a little bit, that's always going to be something that's discouraging. It's going to be something that really rocks your boat, and that's exactly what happened. So the third period, we score 3 straight goals to make it 4-4. So everybody's probably, absolutely out of their minds thinking, oh my gosh, here we go. This is what we couldn't do against Philadelphia, is come all the way back. But we did. We came all the way back. And as much as he's my favorite player and as much as I love him, I've got to really just kind of take it to Kaner for that stupid penalty, that stupid trip that he did. It wasn't anything it was away from the puck, and it was just a penalty that just doomed us. Now, granted, he did score the tying goal, and granted, he did have another point. He has 3 points over this weekend. He's doing his part, but he did make that trip that basically set up the power play, their only power play score of the game. That was basically our one, we were 1 for 2 on the penalty kill, and that was the one that got by us. And we didn't get anything going on the power play ourselves. So there we go. Special teams did us in both games over the weekend. A little bit more about the weekend. We had 2 hat tricks against us. Now, folks, that to me, 2 hat tricks in 2 days against us, that better be something that's being talked about and addressed right now. Because especially if that other hat trick is the one goal that made the difference against the Wild, you should not be, as a defensive-minded team, which the Red Wings have been for most of this season, there's got to be some kind of answer to that 2 to 3 goal. Between goals 2 and 3, there has to be some kind of mindset that stops and shuts him down. I mean, they do it in the NBA. They do it in NFL. They intentionally walk hitters in baseball. So there's a way to prevent some of these things from happening, and they didn't. So having a hat trick from Peral and a hat trick from Kaprizov, to me, doing that in 2 days, especially one after the other, that should not be happening. So obviously coming away from the weekend, when I went in on to Friday's show, I was thinking hopefully we can get 3 out of a possible 4 points, because you're thinking you're going to get the 2 from the Rangers and maybe an overtime loss to Minnesota. Well, it was looking like that we could get at the very least an overtime loss when Kaner scored that goal with about 5 minutes left to go in the period in regulation. But like I said, stupid mistakes will end up costing us. And we've been pretty disciplined in staying out of the penalty box. We obviously were pretty disciplined yesterday in staying out of the penalty box, but not quite enough disciplined. Really dumb penalty there, Kaner, and it's really disappointing that was what actually had to do us in. As much as they fought back, as much as you fought back, getting your 15th goal of the season and getting an extra point somewhere along the way there. I think that he assisted on Aljo's goal. We had a goal from Comfer as well, goal from Kaner. We're sitting there, we're fighting back, and it's just too bad that it came up short. So we move on, right? We move on to see we're 19. So looking at basically how we were since that last win, it was an overtime win in Toronto. And then still a few days later, we were still in first place in the Atlantic Division. So since then, since January 21st, that overtime win against Toronto, we are 9-13-4, including 2-7-2 at Little Caesars Arena. Now that's what we're basically going to talk about, is home sour home. It is definitely not sweet to be at LCA, and I'm not very encouraged by 3 straight home games, especially the homestand that's ahead of us. I feel like the only thing that's going to probably be the givens or a given in any of these 3 games is probably New Jersey. Now, the Blue Jackets have really started to fall apart. So that's the only thing I see as a positive. But the Flyers are still, the Flyers are basically into the 3rd spot in the Metropolitan. They have leapfrogged the Islanders and the Blue Jackets into that spot, so that they're no longer basically sitting at 8th. They're sitting at worst 6th. So, home sour home. 4 straight regulation losses. That is what I will start off with. We are in the midst of 4 straight regulation losses at home. And, we are 20-15-3 overall. When we started out 18-8-1. And a part of that 18-8-1 was 7 overtime wins, basically a team record. And it was looking so good. The last overtime win was one of those that were just like, this breaks the record. Look at us. Who's, looking around, who's with us? Since then, we have basically been leapfrogged by several teams. So what seriously has happened to the Red Wings, especially what has happened to us at home? Some of these home losses, what are we losing to? Obviously these teams, you would say, what are we doing losing these teams? But now you look, these teams have basically leapfrogged us and actually become playoff teams themselves. The Kings, we were sitting there saying back in I believe that one was in late January. It was before we started losing to the Avalanche and the Mammoth again. We lost to the Kings, and you're like, okay, well, the Kings actually, I think, are in the playoff picture now in the West. Flyers last weekend, losing at home, we're thinking, what are we doing losing to the Flyers? Well, the Flyers are now actually in the playoffs. So these are teams that we'd say, what are we doing losing to these teams? But they're actually in the playoff picture now. I will not abide by, let's see, there was a couple of losses there where I'm like, no. One of them was to the Panthers. There's no reason that we should be losing the Panthers. And then that took us out of our game. And then we went and played the Panthers the next game in Florida, and that was the one where we basically blew the lead late, and then basically they scored a goal with 14 seconds to take away our should have been regulation or overtime loss. At least 1 point we would have gotten out of that, even if we'd lost that game in overtime. But those are the kinds of things that where I think we have no business losing these games at home, yet we do. So we'll go into the end of this show. We'll basically just talk about who has leapfrogged us. Because I said we were at one point in January 25th tied for first for the Atlantic, in first in the Atlantic, tied for first in the Eastern Conference. So since then, we have been leapfrogged by the following teams, basically. And a couple of them are not even in our division, but now we got to look at them as they're our nemesis as far as getting that number 8 spot. So we've been leapfrogged by Tampa, Buffalo, Montreal, Boston, Ottawa, Philadelphia, Columbus, and the New York Islanders. And now who is knocking at our back door and had a chance to leapfrog us had they won and not gotten destroyed by the Rangers yesterday? That's right, Washington. So Washington had the possibility, with us losing in regulation yesterday, they had the potential and the ability to possibly leapfrog us and put us even farther back out. As much of an enemy we've been to ourselves, all these other teams have been enemies to themselves just as much. Columbus has been its own worst enemy, and I'm hoping that we can actually take advantage of that and get that too, and maybe push them out of this possible race. I don't know. It's kind of hard to throw, and I hope we can do this. Because we got 5 games left to go. We're 2 points out of the number 8 spot, and that 2 points is a very big 2 points because it's also tiebreaker 2 points that we don't have unless we start getting regulation wins and Ottawa doesn't. That's just as pure and simple as it gets. So looking at these teams that we are basically now, I've popped the bubble, or as far as the orbit, I've pushed them out of the orbit. Teams like Tampa Bay, teams like the Canadiens, and teams like Buffalo. They're no longer our concern. And the Penguins as well. They're no longer our concern because we're not catching them. We're not catching the Penguins because I think that Penguins were on the verge of being in the 4 spot in the Metropolitan for a second. That's why I said they were in our orbit, because we might have been having to fight them for that 8 seed. But it's not that way anymore. So in our orbit, basically, and you'll say, well, the Flyers are number 3, so why are they still in? But the Flyers could easily be leapfrogged themselves by the Islanders, or maybe even the Blue Jackets, or even the Capitals. So here's how it goes. Ottawa, they have Lightning, Panthers, Islanders, Devils, and Leafs left to go. So they got a couple of tough ones. They got the Lightning soon enough that the Lightning are not going to be resting their players. We get the Lightning second to last game of the season. They may be resting their players by then and maybe giving us a shot if we're still in the picture. We may not be. Islanders, basically, new coach, Pete DeBoer. So Pete DeBoer got hired by the Islanders basically over the weekend. That means Patrick Waugh got fired. I don't know. It's kind of interesting these teams firing these coaches this late in the season. The Golden Knights obviously have shown that it's proven. I on Facebook I basically said that the Golden Knights had Calgary and Vancouver on the slate, or actually vice versa, Vancouver and Calgary, Vancouver first and Calgary, and I said that basically as a way to treat it as two scrimmage games to get tuned up, and really that's exactly what happened, because they go into Edmonton for Game 3 of Tortorella being their coach, and they just absolutely hand it to the Oilers. So I think that really was the design. I don't know what the design is in firing Patrick Waugh, unless that there is some kind of other situation where the Islanders have maybe a couple of gimme games to really test it out and get the lines working. But that's what happened with the Golden Knights, and it's paid off. So we'll see what happens with DeBoer. DeBoer has been a great vice president coach. Let's just put it that way. He's made a lot of runs at being either the vice president or the bronze medalist. So who knows? If that's what Islanders want to settle for, then that's probably their man. DeBoer used to coach the Golden Knights. He used to coach the Sharks. He's coached a lot of teams to runner-up status. Not to say that he's a bad coach. He's a decent coach, but he's not the champion coach. I really don't think so. But Tortorella is a champion coach, be it 22 years ago. And interestingly enough, DeBoer and Tortorella have had their exchange of words. Now they're both, they're not in the Eastern Conference, both of them. One's in the West and one's in the East, where it used to be the other way around. It's kind of interesting. But going back, the Islanders have the Leafs, the Senators, the Canadiens, and the Hurricanes. So they have a little bit of they've got two teams that are basically they got all four of their teams are in the playoff picture right now. So that's a battle. I think Islanders may not have those gimme scrimmages. Blue Jackets, Detroit, Sabres, Canadiens, Bruins, and Capitals. So they play us. That's going to be our one. I basically feel like Tuesday night is going to be do we even do this the rest of the season or not from that point on. If we don't win against Columbus and maybe leapfrog them or whatever, or basically put them farther in our rear view mirror, then the remaining four games are not even worth being talked about. So Flyers have Devils, us, Jets, Hurricanes, and Canadiens. The Capitals have the Leafs, the Penguins twice, and the Blue Jackets. That's a pretty tough row to hoe. So I really feel like outside of the Leafs game, the Capitals probably won't be making any run right now, because those are going to be three tough games, especially the Penguins still jockeying for that positioning right there in that second spot in the Metro. And then we have, obviously, the Jackets, Flyers, Devils, Lightning, and Panthers. So honestly, it's become a point of like no more regulation losses, I think, for the rest of the season. That's really all it comes down to. And I seriously doubt that that's any kind of that's a tall order, and I don't think that we'll be able to fulfill that. I feel like even if we do 3-0 the rest of the way on this homestand, I think the Lightning basically take us out, cut us off at the knees. I don't know. I'd like to have a lot more optimistic look on this, but folks, it's just gotten to the point where we have no reason to have that optimism. We've lost plenty of games against teams that we shouldn't have lost against. We've lost plenty of home games. We lost the Vegas Golden Knights when they were just in their, they've obviously turned their thing around, but we had a lead late against them, lost it, and then lost in overtime. There's 1 point right there. So let's talk about a few of these points along the way. Not too much. I'm basically going to close out the show right now. But how about the Florida game where they basically tied it with however much left to go, and then we couldn't even get the point because we gave up that goal that deflected off a Falk stick into the back of the net. So there's 2 points right there. Yesterday, that's a possible 1 point. If we just stick it out those last two, that's the thing what everybody's thinking. Like, if we don't beat them, if we at least make it to overtime, we get a point out of this game. That's what everybody's thinking. That penalty against Kaner, shut it down. So there's 3 single points here, there, or everywhere. And then, like I said, the Golden Knights game that took from 2-1. There's just too many times like that throughout the season that those add up. I said it from the beginning. I remember during one of the Wings opening games when they lost, and somebody's like, "Oh, take it easy on the goaltender. It's just the first game." Yes, but that's 2 points. And you can see how 2 points are very, very vital somewhere down the line. Folks, thanks for tuning in. This has been the 100th episode of Red Wings Daily. Tomorrow we'll have a little bit of a preview of that Columbus game, see what we can think about for Tantrum Tuesday, see if there's any good fights that have taken place. And in the meantime, LGRW from the PNW.